Should the death penalty still be in use? Before we answer this question, I think that we all should understand what the death penalty is. The majority of us believe that killing is wrong, so why do we justify the death penalty, which is essentially the controlled killing of another human being? Killing, no matter what the circumstance, is wrong and inhumane. Not only that, but some believe that the death penalty is ineffective and does not deter crime. It is expensive and has caused innocent people to be wrongfully sentenced to death. How would we feel if we ourselves, a close friend, or even a family member faced a situation like this? Today, I'm going to talk about the history of the death penalty and some of the issues surrounding the death penalty, such as wrongful sentencing, cost, and effectiveness. There are multiple issues surrounding the death penalty and why it shouldn't be in use. But before we talk about that, I just want to give a little background on what the death penalty is. The death penalty has a long and brutal history. It is extreme, inhumane, and permanent. It cannot be reversed. This is an unfortunate consequence, especially for those who have been wrongfully sentenced to death. According to the California Innocence Project.org, most of the free world has done away with the death penalty, but many states within the United States still continue to use it within their criminal justice systems. In 1972, the death penalty was suspended by the U.S. Supreme Court because it was found to be unconstitutional, as it was imposed disproportionately among minorities as well as the poor. This was only a brief ban that resumed in 1976, and so the government-sponsored killings resumed. DeathPenaltyInfo.org states that the most common form of execution used in the United States is lethal injection, which has been authorized in 32 out of the 50 states, as well as the U.S. military and the U.S. government. Some other states use electrocution, gas chambers, hanging, and even firing squads. The death penalty has also been utilized in some countries for crimes other than murder, such as drug-related offenses and terrorism-related acts. Although these are punishable offenses, the death penalty is not a fair punishment for these crimes. Amnesty.org. Now that we have talked about some of the background of the death penalty, let's talk about the issues surrounding the death penalty. The first of which being wrongfully sentenced to death. As we know, the criminal justice system does not always get it right, which is unfortunate because this puts the innocent at risk of being executed for a crime that they did not commit. According to DeathPenaltyInfo.org, 1,534 people have been executed since 1976, and we are not sure how many of those people actually may have been innocent of the crimes that they were accused of committing. Most courts typically do not entertain the claims of innocence of a defendant that is already dead. A story that I read on National Geographic really stood out to me. A man by the name of Carlos de Luna was convicted of the stabbing of Wanda Lopez in 1983 and executed in 1989. Evidence was revealed that cast doubt on de Luna's guilt and points to another suspect, Carlos Hernandez. Hernandez had a record of crimes similar to the stabbing of Lopez and confessed multiple times to her murder. The police never investigated Hernandez, who looked similar to de Luna, which ultimately led to de Luna's execution. Although there have been many cases when death row inmates were found innocent and saved from the death penalty, there are still cases like de Luna's where a possibly innocent person has faced death. This should never happen. Next, let's break down some of the financial aspects of sentencing an inmate to the death penalty. SupremeCourt.gov states that the defense costs in Kansas averaged about $400,000 per case compared to $100,000 per case when the death penalty was not sought. In Maryland, the average death penalty case resulting in death sentence cost about $300 million. Enforcing the death penalty in Florida costs $51 million more a year than it would cost to punish first-degree murderers with life in prison without parole. There have been 44 executions that have been carried out in Florida since 1976. According to the Palm Beach Post, that amounts to $24 million per execution. Lastly, let's talk about the effectiveness of the death penalty. Does the threat of the death penalty actually deter crime? SPSSI.org states that the death penalty is not necessary for an effective system of criminal justice, and that there's no evidence that many nations or the 12 states that have no death penalty are any less just or less effective in dealing with crime than nations using the death penalty. SPSSI.org also mentions that crime rates in states that use the death penalty are no lower than crime rates in states that do not. In areas where the death penalty has been removed, murder rates have not increased. It is also to be noted that murder rates do not decrease the weeks following the introduction or the reinstatement of the death penalty. According to SPSSI.org, research has failed to produce any evidence that the death penalty is more effective than life imprisonment as a deterrent to murder. Bottom line, the death penalty does not deter crimes. The death penalty has provided no benefits to society, SPSSI.org. It only leaves the state with enormous social and economic costs and possible conviction and execution of the innocent. In order to solve the issues mentioned previously, there are alternatives that can be offered instead of the death penalty. We can take away the death penalty and give murderers who commit heinous crimes that lead to death longer terms of imprisonment. If we offer alternative sentences such as life without parole, this keeps murderers off the streets and helps to avoid the problems that are associated, such as the expensive cost of the death penalty, as well as the potential risk of executing an innocent person. What is life without parole? According to legalmatch.com, life without parole is defined as a person spending the rest of their life in prison. This criminal sentence does not include the option for parole. Deathpenalty.org states that all states that have the death penalty also offer the sentence of life without parole. Most families of the victims to these crimes prefer the defendant to be sentenced to life without parole. Many prosecutors also agree that the costs associated with the death penalty cases are not worth their limited resources, especially since so many cases are overturned. Deathpenalty.org. Deathpenalty.org also mentioned other alternatives to prevent or reduce violent crimes, such as community policing, crime-fighting technology, and restorative justice. Doing away with the death penalty and offering longer terms of imprisonment, such as life without parole, and options to reduce crime can be used as a solution. If we continue to use the death penalty, we continue to kill people, some of which possibly being innocent, bear expensive costs relating to the death penalty, and possibly brutalize society. If we take away the death penalty and offer life without parole instead, this stops us from killing other humans, help prevent wrongful death sentences, and prevent high costs related to the death penalty. We have discussed the ethics surrounding the death penalty, such as wrongful sentencing, cost, and effectiveness. Please consider your thoughts and attitudes on the death penalty. I personally believe that the death penalty should not be used because it can lead to the wrongful death of an innocent person. It is also very cruel. I understand that crimes that lead to death are cruel as well and should be punished, but who are we to determine if someone is sentenced to death or not? The death penalty is just as harsh and